Hey there guys, my name is Tom of MTG Radio, and today we will be going into part 2 of EDH deck building. Now the earlier part was based around, well, building a commander deck from the strategy up. Today's video will be about building a commander deck from the commander down. Now both of these deck building strategies are kind of similar, but actually are very different. Kind of similar but very different, you know? The perfect contradiction. So when you build a commander deck from the strategy up, as shown in the last one, which ended up being Tribal Elves, you really focus on a deck. You build the deck that you want to build. You build the 99 cards first, and you really focus on a deck that really abuses or uses those cards very well. When you build a deck from the commander down, first you find a commander you want to build around, something that maybe brings a twinkle to your eye, or something you've played with for a long time, maybe a commander you've gotten altered, or a commander you've gotten foil out of a new booster pack, or anything like that. And you build it from that level down, really exploiting the commander, because in commander you always have access to that legendary creature. So today I'm going to showcase the building a deck from the commander down strategy, and we're going to start with someone that a new general that I mentioned last time, known as Roon of the Hidden Realms. Now, instead of as we did previously, you'll notice we'll be using MTGO for this. I actually do like the MTGO deck building interface a lot. It's very bare bones, as you pretty much like this video. It's just what you need to do. It's got your colors, got your creatures, got a little mini gatherer in there. It's pretty much perfect for what we're looking to do. So I'm going to demonstrate how to build a commander deck from the commander down, but first we got to look at the commander. So, Roon of the Hidden Realm, 2 green, white, blue for a Vigilance Trampling 4/4. It's a legendary Rhino Soldier, and you can pay 2 mana to exile another target creature. Notice that's not your creature, that's another target creature. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. When I look at Roon of the Hidden Realms, there's 2 things that I really focus in on. We're actually going to pop open the card window so I don't have to keep hovering over it. Gonna build this guy big. Look at this. That's how important the commander is when you're going commander down. It's this important. Alright. Wow. That's obnoxious. Whatever. So, Roon of the Hidden Realms. When looking at this guy, there's a lot of things that first pique my interest. Number 1, he's 5 mana. He's also from Alara, but hey. He's 5 mana, and that's actually a really good commander mana cost for your commanders. I like commanders that can be played mildly early, especially off of some sort of ramp, and Roon I think really fits that build, just straight off of a converted mana cost style. Also, he's big enough to survive through stuff like Pyroclasm, Anger of the Gods, or even Slagstorm, which is actually kind of nice. It's something that comes up a little bit, but more importantly, he can battle through centaurs, beasts, other things, so that you can actually have a decent blocker out of him. Now, when looking at his ability is where he shines. For a single 2 mana, you can exile another target creature and return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Now, there's a host of different ways to utilize this, but let's go to offensive, then how we're going to use it. Offensively, Roon can kill any token immediately. Exile it out of existence, poof, it's gone forever. You can also exile your opponent's attacking creature and kind of maze it with it, as long as it's not in the battlefield ability, and that's actually something we could really use and abuse. Instead, we're going to go for a classic Roon build for this video, just because it'll be easier to showcase that way. So, our build is going to instead go more defensively and more of a more synergistic route, and we're going to really use that exile ability to flicker our creatures. And what I mean by flicker is the actual card Flicker is a good example. If you ever wanted to know where that name came from, it's from the actual card Flicker. So Flicker for 1 and a white, exile a target non-token permanent, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. That's where the ability Flicker came from. You'll notice cards like Flicker Wisp, Ghostly Flicker, and Flicker Form all showcase that. We're going to go for that type of build and for that type of effect. So the first thing is, since we're going to be playing Roon, I am going to immediately go in my deck builder to eliminate both black and red so that I won't be seeing any of those cards. Additionally, I unchecked the My Cards button. That way I have access to more cards that I may not own, but I may want to put in the deck and possibly buy for the future. So when looking at this deck, the first thing that I really want to put into this deck is actually creatures. You'll notice he says exile another target creature, and that's what he's going to be useful on. We're not going to be able to play any artifacts with fading counters. We're not going to be able to blink any enchantments or blink any planeswalkers, which would have been cool, because we could have like -2 to Jace, blink them, -2 them. But can't do that. Instead, we are going to go straight for the money shot and just go straight to creatures immediately. So, When looking through the MTGO interface, especially like this when we're going to collapse the card window here, I first want to look at creatures when it comes to Roon. I'm also going to kind of hide Roon down here. He's down here. Hey, look at Roon. When I look at Roon, the first thing I want to do are end the battlefield effects. Now, the cool thing about MTGO is you see the little search bar, we can search for exactly what we want. So we only want creatures. You'll notice this is the creature tab. I'm going to right click it to only show creatures. And then I'm going to just simply press enters the battlefield. Boop! Then we're going to get... Oh, I should probably spell that correctly. That'd be super useful. There we go. By typing in enters the battlefield, I'm going to get all the creatures that enters the battlefield effects. In fact, now that I realize it, I do want to show more than just our creatures. By showing more than just the creatures, we also get to look at any enchantments, artifacts, or maybe even instant sorceries that interact with this ability. So when looking for this Roon deck, I really want to utilize his tapped ability, his end of the battlefield ability. There's some cards I really want to use. Acidic Slime, chief among them. I love that he's right at A because it'll really show what we're going to be doing with this deck. 3 double green for a death touching 2/2 means he can block anything. When he enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Very simplistic ability, but these are the type of abilities that we really want to capitalize on in this deck. This deck will be a combination of a Toolbox style of deck, just because the cards are going to end up in it, as well as a deck that utilizes these flicker abilities. Angel Finale is a new card from the Commander 2013 product that I absolutely love, and I just can't wait to play it in a bunch of different things. It's a 3-white flying 3/4, which is actually, again, a good size, blocks beasts, blocks centaurs. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. It can be your own, it rarely will be. We're going to be exiling our opponent's cards pretty much every single time. Now, one of the downsides of using the MTGO search engine is this. You also get a lot of abilities. Graft is, of course, an enter the battlefield ability, so it's modular because you enter the battlefield with those counters. That's not really something we want to replicate with our Acidic Slime. We're really looking for enter the battlefield abilities on creatures that give us some sort of benefit. That's going to be our most important thing. Now, we're going to put Augury Owl in here right now. I don't think it's that important. We probably won't end up running it. We'll grab Avenger's Zendikar card just because it's an impactful ability when it hits the battlefield. Putting all of those plants into play at once is very good. In fact, we will bring back out that card window. We will make it a little bit smaller. That way it's a little bit easier to see these guys that are coming into the deck. Put that right there. Alright, so Avenger's Zendikar card comes on in. I just realized that this is going to be pretty much useless because of how this is going to work. Yeah. Card window goes away. Avenger's Zendikar, amazing card in the battlefield ability, an end of the battlefield based deck. Get to flicker in and out of tokens, be able to do it at the end of turn in response to removal. Exactly what we're looking for. We're going to play Bane of Progress, mostly because I don't like playing against it, which means this card not only survives the Grown test, but will destroy our opponents. Smaller abilities like those on Briarhorn. Oh, sorry, we should have clicked that. Smaller abilities like those on Briarhorn and on cards like... I just realized I gotta go back down. And Briarpark Alpha, although both good, are small abilities, and usually just leave us with a 3/3 for 4. Not something we're really looking to do in this type of deck. Or in this type of build at all. Now, when I really look at Roon, there's also some other things you want to keep in mind. I actually want to kind of gravitate towards cards that either have... Well, every single end of the battlefield ability will be a triggered ability, but also have activated abilities. Activated abilities in this type of deck is very strong because it's going to be something we're going to be doubling with our Roon the Enchanter later, so we can get those abilities more often. Additionally, creatures that may have tap abilities, we will also want, because we are going to be placing both of those type of effects into this deck in order to take more advantage out of this new commander and basically superpower him up to be able to destroy our opponents. Now, as I slowly but carefully go through this, I am going to just basically start taking cards that may or may not be good. And I really mean that may or may not be good. Some of these cards may be great, some of them might not fit into the deck when we get to full, but knowing that we're going to be playing at least 39 lands, we have 60 cards we can put in this deck. I said that last time, but I'm going to stick to it this time. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a lot of cards that have great end of the battlefield abilities, then we're going to see where they spread across the converted mana cost spectrum. Most of them will probably be a little bit higher on the CMC than lower on the CMC. And we'll figure out where to go from there. I really do want a bunch of cards that will enter the battlefield and put lands into play for me, like Solemn Simulacrum, so Civic Wayfinder isn't going to make this deck, although it is a good idea. Clone Shell is a card that I see in these type of decks commonly, but is a card that won't make this one. The simple reason why is... We're going to talk about Clouds of Curio after this. The ability is too variable. It's got an imprint ability that looks at the top 4 cards, exile one face down, that put them into your bottom of your library anywhere. When this dies, you turn it face up if it's a creature card put onto the battlefield under your control. The problem with Clone Shell is that it has to die, and people just won't block it. Or they won't kill it. Cloud Chaser Eagle, although the art is great, doesn't really do enough for this type of deck. Destroying an enchantment, we're going to have a lot of great under the battlefield abilities. That one isn't going to be one we're going to be trying to use. And Deadeye Navigator is the absolute king of enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield abilities. 4 double blue for a 5/5 spirit. It's got Soulbound, and for 1 and a blue, you can blink either the Soulbound or either of the Soulbound creatures. It'll enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield immediately. This is also a good time to talk about the Avacyn Restored wording for enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield. Something we're going to keep in mind whenever possible, and in fact use as much as we can. The enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield wording from AVR is actually very interesting because how it reads is that when you exile the creature, you return it to the battlefield under your control, as opposed to a card like... Do we have any on the... here? Yeah. Ooh. Let's look up... I really want to look up one real quickly. Let's go with something like... As opposed to the classic wording, which reads, you exile another target permanent, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. You notice this says your control. The reason why this is so strong when it comes to a enter the battlefield, leave the battlefield type deck, so you get to keep their creature forever. So if you gain control of it with an effect like, let's say, Control Magic or Gilded Drake, you can bounce it with Deadeye Navigator and keep it forever, which is perfect and exactly what you would like to do. Especially on a repeatable card like Deadeye Navigator. We're going to grab this Delirium Primordial, 5 double blue for a 5/5 flyer. The body isn't that bad, but it's when it enters the battlefield that it really gets great. You get to exile 3 instant sorcery spells from your opponent's graveyards, 1 from each, of course, and you can cast them for free, which is exactly what this deck's wanting to do. Now, Draining Welk is a fantastic spell for this type of build because you can bounce it in and out with Roon to counter your opponent's spells. The only problem with it, and it might not make it all the way in, is just because it's a very expensive mana cost, and honestly, kind of a dick move. So it more than likely won't make the final deck, but it's still really good. We will play this awesome art duplicate, but Dust Elemental is actually a very interesting call for this type of deck. 2 double white for a flash flying fear 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, return 3 creatures you control to their owner's hand. Very strong card based off of that simplistic world view of basically bouncing 3 creatures you control their owner's hand. The problem with Dust Elemental is that it requires a specific board state. The same reason why you'll never see Cyclonic Rift banned, because it requires a winning board state to actually win with it. Dust Elemental is the same exact way. If you don't have 3 creatures on the battlefield, Dust Elemental is incredibly underpowered and honestly kind of bad. So that's why he's not going to make this deck either. He's just too high variance to play an EDH deck, especially in one that's going to be as powerful as this one will be, because of the abusable enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield abilities that run rampant all along the annals of Magic the Gathering cards. All of them. Every single one. Face Fitter is a card I would love to be able to play, but once again, Roon only bounces creatures, so mwah mwah. Face Fetter's not coming in this time. Farhaven Elf will. Once again, we want to be playing effects that put lands into play when the creatures come in, so Farhaven Elf and Solemn Lacrum are pretty much auto-includes. Fathom Mage isn't a card I really want to play, but we may, just for the extra draw effect from our cards entering the battlefield and leaving the battlefield so consistently. Fiend Hunter is a card I want to be able to do, basically the quote-unquote Oblivion Ring trick, or the Fiend Hunter trick, where I actually made finger quotes, by the way, just for those following along at home. What you can do, because there are 2 triggered abilities, one that leaves the battlefield, one that enters the battlefield. If you blink it once Fiend Hunter enters the battlefield, you will have the leaves the battlefield ability go off, and then the enters the battlefield ability, which means you get to exile that creature forever. And then with a card like Roon, he comes back and gets another one. You just get so much value for your money. It's a card that we would never ask to not be in this type of build. Now you see, we're still really building around Roon's ability. Everything interacts with Roon. This is all Roon specific cards. The opposite of building from a strategy up is this type of build, where we really want to make sure that every single card interacts with our general. The only downside from building general up, or sorry, commander down, is that you can run into situations where your general gets tucked or sent away for misbehavior, and in those type of situations, it's actually really disappointing. Now, the cool part about Gilded Drake, and the reason why I really want to play it, is because you notice that this isn't a creature you control. When we give our opponent a Gilded Drake, we can blink it. It'll come back onto the battlefield under our control, and we get to trade it away again. So we just get to keep stealing our opponent's creatures. It will be super fun. Super duper duper fun. Now, Glimmerpoint Stag is actually a great card for this deck because it exiles another target permanent, just like Flicker Wisp. A good way to get rid of tokens, but also a good way to get rid of a moat for a turn so we can attack through. That is going to be something we're going to pay attention to, are ways for us to actually win the game. One of the reasons we may be playing Creative Hoof Behemoth is that we actually have a way to win the game. One of the main problems I see in EDH decks when I do see them come across my table, I sound like a really weird boss that way, but whenever someone sends in an EDH deck, is that the most common issue they have is that their deck is made to not lose, but it's also not made to win. One of the main things you need to do, especially in a deck like this that focuses on a theme that isn't conducive to winning, which is just bouncing your creatures in and out, you have to be able to win the game. No matter how many times you destroy your opponent's artifacts or enchantments, if you're not attacking for 10 damage a turn, you're still not winning the game. And if you're not winning the game, you're going to lose the game. It's that simple. No matter how defensive your deck is. If you can't win, you can't win. You'll notice we're also adding in a lot of ways to make extra tokens. Hornet Queen being one of them, Adventurer's Zendikar as well, and Captain of the Watch. I like all these type of abilities in these type of decks. It gives us, I'm going to say it again just for fun, a way to win the game pretty solidly, because if we can just keep linking them out with Deadeye Navigator or our own General, we can create a very large and impressive board state to really make sure that our opponents can't not only can't attack us, but we can attack them for a huge amount of damage. And the best part about this guy is that you get insect creatures with Death Touch, so the same reason why Acidic Slime is so good is why that card's so good. Looking at our deck, there is a thought I have bubbling in the back of my mind. Besides that doubling of triggered abilities and that doubling of activated abilities, which I don't think we're going to be able to go on the activated abilities plan because these are all triggered abilities, so Roon might not be getting that much support that way. I do want to keep in mind the idea of using a card like Birthing Pod to really take advantage of all of these, this sort of toolbox deck we're piecing together. You'll notice we're bringing in a lot of cards that interact with specific board states to really get around them. Enduring Stomp Howler makes sure we get rid of that propaganda. Draining Welk makes sure we counters that important spell. Hornet Queen gives us a bunch of creatures. That kind of stuff is very important at specific parts of the game and in specific games. It's one of the reasons why toolbox decks are so good. Jace's Mindseeker is a possibility. I wouldn't count on it entering the deck. It's a decent card, but its ability to not hit is really high and something we're not looking forward to doing. Once again, because we are creatures, Roon only blinks creatures, we're not going to be going for Journey to Nowhere. You can do the same Fiend Hunter trick with Journey to Nowhere, but we won't be able to because we can only blink our own or our opponent's creatures. Very important to make sure you got that part down. We are going to play in Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide is going to be one of the most important cards of this entire deck, as well as Revel Arc and another card coming up. We can quickly talk about Karmic Guide, though. 3 double white for a flying protection black 2/2. When enters the battlefield, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's got Echo of 3 white, so it actually dies for you as well, which, funnily enough, for this type of deck, is exactly what we want. It's everything we want in a card, really. You'll notice we're also playing a lot of cards that just draws cards. That way we have a way to get to an endgame that's really nice. Griff Vanguard is one of them. We will be playing Mold Drifter because it's Mold Drifter, but also in this type of deck, Mold Drifter is astonishingly great. Knight Captain of Eos is a card that I'm considering for this deck because of its ability to... let me take a breath here. Knight Captain Eos is a card I'm considering for this deck because there's one thing this deck has a problem with, it's falling behind. And Knight Captain of Eos makes sure that we get to live and slowly make sure that we get to live through onslaughts of goblins, elves, centaurs even. I like saying centaurs, apparently. Centaurs even. And make sure that we get to live to the turns where we really want to. Lavinia the 10th, the same exact idea. Also because I really just want to experiment with Lavinia. I think she could be a very strong card in this format, just because of its ability to lock down cards like Signets, be able to lock down tokens, and that's what really makes her such a great spell. So I really do want to try her out in this deck. I don't know if it's going to make it all the way through, but it just might. Luxodon, Hierarch, and Lotus Cobra are part of the mythic appeal that I talk about sometimes. The idea being that people like playing cards that are really expensive because they can play these really expensive cards in a format they love. What actually ends up happening is they usually underperform, so that's always depressing. Lotus Cobra goodens only a very small amount of decks that can really take advantage of this ability. Luxodon Hierarch is a card I'm considering for this deck, but might not even make it all the way through. Aaliyah Sky Knight, the Detain ability is actually a really interesting idea, but it's not something we're really looking for. Same with Manowar. I feel like we're not really looking to bounce our opponent's creatures all the time. It leads to very unfun board states, and just a lot of times it honestly just sucks. I am looking to play Master Biomancer as a way to really progress the game state, being able to make our creatures really big really quickly, especially when it's a 2/2 in the air. When you're playing a 4/4 Mold Drifter and drawing 2 cards, that's when you know you've won at life. And that's what this deck is trying to do. Mnemonic Wall is an idea for this deck. We will be playing a nice amount of Mystics and Sorceries. We'll actually be playing cards like Second Sunrise to really take advantage of all the end of the battlefield abilities we have in this deck. Again, Mold Drifter, an easy include in this build, as well as Mystic Snake and Mirror Battlesphere. You notice that we've already placed most of the Primordials in this deck, and we will be playing every single one of them. This is the type of deck that's great with the Primordials, and I have no problem in saying so. The Primordials were built for a deck that enters the battlefield, leaves the battlefield. No matter how boring it may be, that doesn't make it any less strong, and you should play it if you have the chance. Just as Beyonce said, if you like it, then you should put a ring on it. If you like Roon, then you should put a Primordial in it. It's that simple. We are going to play Ondu Giant, again, just reinforcing that idea of if there's a creature that puts lands in the battlefield, we will play it. Ondu Giant is one of those cards. Being able to blink this multiple times throughout a game is incredibly powerful, and something I really look forward to doing. Just being able to put lands in the battlefield is probably one of the strongest things you can do. We will play Plockaworm again as a. We may play Plockaworm. It might not actually make it all the way through, but it's definitely an idea for the deck and something I wouldn't mind thinking of. The 7 gain on life is very important and something that not a lot of cards can actually bring to us. So always keep it in mind. Prime Speaker seems like a perfect card for this type of build. We get to draw near infinite cards if it hits the battlefield with Roon here. Wish we could play Primeval Titan, but it's sadly banned. Actually, I wish we could play Primeval Titan. I wish only we could play Primeval Titan. We could never play against it. That would be perfect, but we don't live in a perfect world, no matter how much we wish we did. Regal Force is an idea if it didn't say for each green creature you control. This is good for the Elf deck, and in fact probably would have went into the Elf deck we built earlier, except I did not have it in the back of my head when we built that deck. Revelark is part 2 of the Karmic Guide Revelark combination of cards. Now, we're not going to be going for the full combo, which involves Body Double and Mirror Entity, but we will be playing these two cards as a sort of inescapable late game that's just so hard to deal with, and we will be playing Rift Sweeper as well. One of the only ways for our opponents to really make sure that we stop being annoying and winning the game, which is how I'm going to put it, is to remove our creatures from our graveyard. Rift Sweeper takes those exiled cards and put them back into our library so we can search them out again. Very, very, very strong and an important element in a deck like this, especially when we can blink it and keep putting other cards into our library. With the profusion of cards like Grey Merchant entering the format, we're going to be seeing a lot more exiling removal. Cards like Sever the Bloodline should see much more play nowadays, and because of that, a card like Rift Sweeper will actually be much more important for the Commander format as time goes on. So, might as well just grab the card while it's available and play it now. Seagate Oracle, a low mana cost, high filtering card that is definitely going to enter this deck. The ability to look at 2 cards and be able to put one in hand and one on the bottom. It's basically a draw card spell, but it gets us to our lands and makes sure that we're able to play our lands well. The good part about playing a Roon deck, especially in the Bant colors, is that you're never really messed up on lands, because blue does such a great job of drawing cards and green does such a good job of putting extra lands in the battlefield that you never really worry about hitting your land drops, and you also never really worry about getting the correct land on the battlefield, which is something that a lot of other decks can't say. A red-white deck, like a Jorgadine the Prevailer deck, really needs to rely on cards like Signets or Key Runes or even the Stones to be able to really get its mana out correctly or even well. Because of that, because of this reliance on artifact mana, cards like Bane of Progress can just come on in and ruin your day. Never something you want to have happen, but sometimes that's just how life works. We are going to grab Soul Foundry. Soul Foundry is a really fun card to play in this type of deck. One of my best friend Trevor's favorite cards in the entire world, and a card we have no problem playing. You'll notice we're already at 53 cards, and we're going to keep putting cards into the deck. We won't only be creatures, I promise. We will be making some hard cuts as the day goes on. Now, Stonehorn Dignitary is a type of card I'm really considering for this deck, once again, to go along with that kind of utility build. 3 and a white for a 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent skips their next combat phase. A good way to make sure that someone that just casts their own Avengers Zendikar can't get in on us. And if we have Stonehorn Dignitary up with Roon, we basically have our own mini moat. If our opponent plays Overrun, we can just Stonehorn Dignitary him. So let's keep it going. This coffee is fantastic. Stormfront Rider follows the same problems as Dust Elemental. The fact that you have to have a specific, not Pacific like the ocean, a specific board state to really make it work is its main issue. Also, the fact that it puts those cards into your hand instead of instead of blinking them directly onto the battlefield is another one of the main issues with it. Now, I'm going to go a little bit quicker here, going to scroll a little bit faster. This is the type of deck that I actually know how to build pretty well. So we're going to basically put anything that, I'm going to be honest, that really hits my eye as we scroll down into this deck just to get this first part done. And you'll notice there is a lot of damn cards that interact with this type of build. The fact is the Blink deck is super fun and super popular because it's super fun. This is actually a really cute card, not one we're going to be playing. We're going to be playing a lot of clone effects. Clone effects are always good in a deck like ours because Roon can make those clones better as the game goes on. That's actually the entire reason why it's so good. Void Mage Hutcher is an idea. It's a card that I've really been experimenting with in the Commander metagame. Let's actually kind of put her out in the open here. So Void Mage Hutcher for 3 and a blue is a flashing 2/2. When enters the battlefield, counter target activated ability. When we cast a spell, you may return Void Mage Hutcher to its owner's hand. The fact is, a lot of creatures nowadays have these great activated abilities, whether it be Ashling or Olivia, that you just really need to make sure don't go off. Void Mage Hutcher makes sure those abilities don't go off, which is really good, and something I can't wait to use. White Mane Lion definitely coming into our deck. We mentioned that we didn't like cards like Dust Elemental. White Mane Lion has that flash ability just like Dust Elemental, but doesn't require 3 other creatures to be on the battlefield, which is what really makes it so fantastic. Now, I did want to talk about, where did this card go? Cloudstone Curio. Curio for 3 mana. Whenever a non-artifact permanent enters the battlefield under our control, we may return another permanent we control that shares a card type with it to its owner's hand. Kind of like a White Mane Lion at all times. It's going to allow us to repeat specific. It's going to allow us to repeat, repeatedly use. Thank you. There it is. Repeatedly use specific creatures multiple times, as well as bring back creatures that may have outlived their utility already. And that's it. This is our first. Look at this. 68 cards. We just ship it up and build, right? Nope. That's not how this is going to work. So we have a bunch of creatures already. We're at 68 cards, and we're going to keep going deeper. We want to use Roon of the Hidden Realms, so the first thing I really want to do is find ways to untap our Roon. I want to use them more than once a turn, don't you? That answer should be yes, by the way. Why are there so many cards to untap on them? This is pretty silly. That's why. All right, so the reason why General Down is probably a more advanced way to build a deck than Strategy Up is because it's harder to find cards that really work around the general. So when I look at Roon of the Hidden Realms, some of the stuff that I really want to bring into this deck, I kind of want to bring Derevi just because that'd be really cute, but that's not good enough. So when I look at Roon, I want to use the ability immediately, so I want to play 1,000-Year Elixir. I'm going to stop the slow version of this. We're going to play 1,000-Year Elixir. 3 mana, we can activate abilities of creatures we control as though they had haste, and we can also pay 1 to untap target creature. This with Roon is fantastic. We're also going to play Strionic Resonator. Strionic Resonator, 2 mana. 2 mana to tap it, copy target triggered ability. You control may choose not to. You may choose new targets for the copy. Good news, all of these triggered abilities. That's why Strionic Resonator is so important in this type of build. Speaking of important, we're going to put in... Oh, wow. We're going to put in Rings of Brighthearth. 3 mana. Whenever you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, we can pay 2. If we do copy that ability, you may choose new targets for that copy. These are 3 cards that are perfect with Roon, especially 1,000-Year Elixir and Rings of Brighthearth. Rings of Brighthearth with Roon lets us get that double tap. We can also choose new targets for the Roon, so we can blink more than 1 card at once. Speaking of blinking, there's some specific cards I do want to play that interact with it. One of them is Ghostway. Ghostway. For 2 and a white, for exile each creature we control, return them to the battlefield under the owner's control to be an next end step. That comes into the deck. We are also going to play Second Sunrise. And the other version of Second Sunrise, which I always forget the name of, so I'm just going to put returns and hit instant so that it just pops up for me. Oh, it should just be return, isn't it? Yeah. And actually, this is going to be really good for us as well. Realizing that I just hit return, I can grab some cards that I also want to play in this deck, like Cloud Shift, which will be a 1 mana effect that's actually really strong. I do want to play Cyclonic Rift as a way to make sure we can get our creatures through. Face Reward is a card I was thinking of, though. 3 and a white, we return to the battlefield all permanent cards and in our graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Very strong ability that a lot of opponents just can't even deal with, which is honestly kind of hilarious. We'll also play Momentary Blink and Otherworldly Journey on our own creatures, of course. As well as, oh, there was one more. Where are you at? Return to Dust. We'll get into our next parts in a second. What I mean by next parts is we have all the creatures we're playing in this deck. Like, I don't think we're going to be playing anything that doesn't ever enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield ability. Now we need to get to our other pieces of the pie. We need to get to the parts that really make this deck sing. And one of them is a repeatable effect to enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield on our creatures. Now, there's two creatures that immediately spring to mind when I say that, at least as far as I'm concerned, and one of them is Miss Meadow Witch. This card is a nightmare to play against. Not to play. This card's amazing to play. I just didn't know if it had a dash in it, so I have to just put in Mist here. There is no dash. Miss Meadow Witch for 1 blue-white hybrid is a 1/1 Kithkin Wizard. 2 white-blue. Exile target creature. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And we're also playing Nephalia Smuggler. Nephalia Smuggler, 3 and a blue, exile another target creature, return that card to the battlefield under our control. Even though we're not going to completely use the Aviar wording, like I mentioned before, both of these cards are going to be incredibly important to not only come down as early abilities, but to make sure that we're able to activate our creatures in case Roon goes away. Now, since our deck is going to be general specific, we do want to make sure we can always find Roon if we need to. And I do think this deck is a Birthing Pod deck. Birthing Pod is a card we mentioned in a earlier deck tech. 3 and a green hybrid. 3 and a green new Phyrexian mana, and then 1 and a green new Phyrexian mana to sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with CMC equal to 1 plus a sacrifice creature CMC. Put the card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you cast a sorcery. This card's going to be very important for our deck. We also want to find other ways to be able to search through our deck for specific creatures, and one of the best ways to do that is actually Tooth and Nail. Tooth and Nail, a card that I usually associate with one of my best friends, Kevin. Also just amazing in this type of build. 5 double green, choose 1, search your library for the 2 creatures, or reveal them, or put the 2 creatures from your hand onto the battlefield. This might just be Roon, but it could also just be something as little as Avengers and the card Creator of Behemoth to win the game. That's probably not something that will stay in the deck. We're probably going to take out Creator of Behemoth and add in more win conditions, just because I really do not like this ability when combined with both. Not that it's bad, it's actually incredibly powerful. It's just not something I like playing. Speaking of cards I love playing, let's talk about Hibernation's End. Hibernation's End it's not my favorite card, but it's damn well close. 4 and a green for some Thawing Polar Bears. It's a rare enchantment with a cumulative upkeep of 1. Let's open up that card window again. Card window is annoying. There we go. Hibernation's End for 4 and a green is a rare enchantment. Cumulative upkeep of 1. Whenever you pay its cumulative upkeep, you may search your library for a creature card with CMC equal to the number of H counters on it and put it onto the battlefield. If you do, shuffle your library. So we now have 2 ways to really get cards out of our library when we need them in both Birthing Pod and Hibernation's End. I do want just one more, and I think I know the perfect card for it. Do you know the perfect card for it? I hope you do, because it starts with Green Sun Zenith and ends with Green Sun Zenith. Green Sun Zenith, the card banned in Modern because it's just too good in EDH. It's just right. X and a green to search your library for a green creature with CMC X or less. And then get to put it onto the battlefield and shuffle our library. Exactly what we're looking for in this type of build. So, now that we have our creatures, now that we have our extra utility on our cards that specifically interact with Roon, let's start putting in... Oh, I actually forgot Rite of Replication. Rite of Rep. Did I spell this wrong? I did. Right, faux rep? That's not how words work, Tom. Rite of Replication comes in just because it can make us 9 copies of any of our creatures. I don't know about you, but that sounds amazing. I agree, it does sound amazing. Alright, we are also going to play Conjurer's Closet. Conjurer's Closet is going to give us a free activation of Roon during our end step, and we are going to play... I think we can leave it at Conjurer's Closet. That seems to be just... enough. Soul Foundry is going to do a similar ability to this. We could play Mimic Vat if we thought our creatures were going to die a lot. They are going to die a bunch. I'm not saying they aren't, but I don't think Mimic Vat is what we're really looking for in this type of build. Mimic Vat's a lot better in a controlling shell. We may be a little bit controlling, but we're not that controlling. And yeah, so let's go with the next part. How do we draw cards? We need ways to draw cards. I would like at least 8 ways to draw cards. This type of deck can run out of fuel very quickly, so we need to have those abilities in here. We have Tower Geist, Seagate Oracle, Fathom Mage. Ooh, this is not Mass Admirers. There we go. We're getting there. Those are our 4 drops. 5 drop wise, we have Mole Drifter. And like, that's honestly it, because I'm not really going to consider Sphinx Bethune a draw spell. So we need more ways to draw cards. So thinking off the top of my head, which ways do we really want to draw cards in Bant? Well, there's about 1 million of them. So when it comes to drawing cards in EDH, some of the things you have to consider are you need a card that's more than just a draw spell, especially if you're going into blue. We want cards that not only draw cards, but either draw cards in amazing abilities or have a very cheap way to draw those spells or have a repeatable way to draw those cards. Now, in this type of build where we only want specific cards in specific parts of the game, I actually want to play Ponder as a method to make sure we can sculpt our draws in the early game. I also want to play Mind's Eye. Mind's Eye. It's going to allow us to draw cards whenever our opponents draw cards, which is actually a very strong card to put in a later game scenario. I also want to play Urban Evolution. This is going to be a deck that's going to require a lot of lands in the battlefield. If we are honestly looking to flicker cards with Roon a lot, Urban Evolution is not only going to let us play an additional land, but we also get to draw 3 cards, which is perfect. In that same vein of drawing 3 cards, I do want to play either Harmonize or Concentrate. Now, the best way to figure out which one we want to do, we're going to hit the stats. And looks like we have a little bit more green than blue. We're actually a perfect build across. So we're going to grab Harmonize. And notice we're at 91 cards already. We have about 30 cards to cut right now, which will be super fun. We'll grab ourselves a Harmonize. And now, what are we at? We have Harmonize, Urban Evolution, Mind's Eye, Ponder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9's good for me. I like 9. So how are we getting lands? Great question, Tom. Let's figure that out together. We have Wood Elves, Farhaven Elf, Ondu Giant. Kind of Coiling Oracle, not really. That's the same thing with drawing cards. I guess this guy always draws cards. So Coiling Oracle at least fits under that realm. We have Solemn Simulacrum for lands. This is only 4. That's not good. There must be other ways to get lands in here. And looks like we are at a big no, so let's get more lands in this deck. So first thing, we're going to start it off with the best ways to get lands in both green, blue, or white. Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Explosive Vegetation. This is a beautiful suite of 3 cards that I would heavily suggest in any EDH deck that's playing green, especially one that's multicolored. We will be playing a nice amount of basics, so playing these 3 cards at the very least will be very good. I do want a little bit of Artifact Mana. I think they'll be very useful for us. So since we're grabbing so many forests, we're grabbing so many basics, it'll be important to play cards that allow us to also utilize a spell like one of my favorites, and probably one of your favorites, Revel Arc. Let's grab Burnished Harp. This is a card that's been surprisingly amazing. Not even surprisingly, this is a card that has been amazing as far as EDH is concerned. So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I like 8 and 8. So we have 8 ways to draw cards, 8 ways to put extra lands in play. The good part about those 8 ways to draw cards is that there are also 8 ways to find more lands. Now, speaking of Theros, is another card that deserves to go in this deck. Actually, 2 cards. You'll notice when I first hit Teferi that we're going to get the other part of Teferi. Teferi Mage's Zalfir is a great 5-drop. For 2 triple blue, it's got Flash. We can play creature cards as though they had Flash, as well as our opponents only be able to play cats so they can cast a sorcery. Good way to make sure our opponents can't interact on our turn, and a good way to interact on their turns. But if we want to interact on their turns, you know what I want. I know I want it. There aren't any blurred lines here. We want Prophet of Crufix. This card is amazing. 3 green, blue, untap all creatures and lands you control during each player's untap step. You may cast creature cards so they have Flash. This, with both Roon and Teferi and our kind of puzzle box of creatures, is going to put together a smattering of amazing effects. So, all of these go into the deck. You'll notice I have this big old line of cards we're not taking out. because we aren't taking them out. It's that simple. So now that we have both Prophet of Krufix and Teferi in this deck, and actually I'm just going to immediately eliminate Teferi because we already have Prophet of Krufix. Prophet of Krufix we can get Green Sun Zenith, which is why it's staying in the deck as opposed to Teferi. I do want ways to destroy artifacts or enchantments. So how are we destroying artifacts or enchantments in this deck? We have Harmonic Sliver. We have Terastodon, Sylvan Primordial. We have Return to Dust. We have Bane of Progress. And we have Indrink Stomphowler. Looking at the CMC on these things, Sylvan, Terastodon, Bane of Progress, Indrink Stomphowler, we have so many over 5 or above that we do want at least 1 or 2 underneath 5 in order to destroy artifacts or enchantments. We are in Bant. Bant does a great job of this, and speaking of, let's look at Bant Charm. Bant Charm is going to do a lot for us in this deck. It's going to destroy an artifact or put a creature on the bottom of its owner's library or counter target instant spell. This is the type of utility that comes with a charm. There's a lot of charms in Magic the Gathering, but this charm is going to be perfect for our deck, not only because it's in our colors, but because it'll also bottom our opponent's offensive. It's going to bottom our opponent's creatures. Oh, also Acidic Slime. And it's going to destroy imposing artifacts. Both things we really want to do. And I think... do we want one more is my last question. I don't want to play just straight up Disenchant. We could play Aura Shards. We are going to be flickering cards in the entire game, so this card might actually be able to shine, and it usually does. So this looks like we have 9 ways to destroy artifacts or enchantments. I like that. We probably only need 8, so we're going to get rid of Terastodon, and there we go. We got a suite of 8 cards, once again, that destroys artifacts or enchantments. And perfect. So we have 8 ways to get extra lands, 8 ways to destroy artifacts and enchantments, 8 ways to get card draw in our deck, and now we have 98 cards in a deck that's going to be playing 39 lands. So we can put a single plains in here and ship it. I feel like that's a horrible idea, so instead we're just going to go on in and cut, well, about 30-ish cards. By 30-ish, I mean more than 30 cards. This will be fun. So... I love cutting. It's probably one of my favorite parts of doing EDH because it really lets you reanalyze your deck and see where we're at. Looking at the deck that we currently have, there are some cards that no matter what cannot come out of the deck. Karmic Guide, Revelark, Conjurer's Closet. We already have Solemn Simulacrum over here. Stronic Resonator again for our own general. Same with Thousand Year Elixir. And we might be able to... no, we have to play Rings of Bright Hearth. Alright, because we're going general down. These cards cannot leave the deck. And now let's look at what we're left. So, Cloud Shift is probably just not enough of an ability, so we're going to take it out. I still like Green Sun Zenith because of the utility it offers. Great Behemoth is a card that I really dislike playing in EDH nowadays. It just feels like an auto-win card and not something I really want to play, so we are going to leave Great Behemoth off the table. If I were in a more competitive metagame, I would definitely play Great Behemoth. This is probably one of the best cards for the deck, but I honestly just really revile playing this spell. I think it's disgusting, so we're going to take it out. The Life Gain of Clockworm isn't worth really including in the deck, so we're going to also take this guy out. Phyrexian Jester does the same job of Duplicant, but we really want that job done well. Luminant Primordial is just like Duplicant and Phyrexian Jester, so we now have 3 cards that do a similar ability. I think if we're going to choose between Ingester and Luminant Primordial, I'd rather have the Primordial than the Ingester, so Ingester can hit the bin. Hornet Queen's going to give us those tokens, just like Avenger of Zendikar. We don't have an ability like Diluvian Primordial besides Chancellor of the Spires, and to be perfectly honest, the fact that Chancellor of the Spires can go infinite is the reason why I don't want to play it, so it will also leave this game. Mere Battlefield is a way for us to win the game. Being able to blink this guy multiple times means we can deal a lot of direct damage to our opponent, so he stays in the battlefield. Same with Tooth and Nail. The effect is a little bit too great to ignore, but at the same time, we made sure it doesn't lead to any auto-win conditions in our deck. Sphinx of Bethune is going to let us draw a lot of cards during our opponent's turn with its Factor Fiction ability. Sunblast Angel keeps us safe. Sun Titan, we have a lot of 3s that we want to keep him to play. Jace's Mindseeker, we mentioned it before, but this isn't a card we really want to play in this deck. Same with Draining Welk. I feel like the effect is strong, but the mana cost is just too much. Especially if we're going to be blinking it a lot of times, we don't get that full effect. Wild Pair is a cute idea, but since our deck is so toolboxy, I don't really think it's going to survive in this type of build. Captain of the Watch doesn't give us enough tokens, but Dead Navigator does. Prime Speaker, we're going to keep in a sort of... I'm going to call it a maybe pile. Alright, let's make this a little bit smaller, but also so that you can see these cards a lot easier, but while I'm rambling on. Alright, so Prime Speaker is going to stay in a maybe pile. These guys aren't going anywhere. Vesuvian Shapeshifter is a cool idea, but it's just a clone, and we don't really need that many clones. Thragtusk will stay in for its life gain and its extra tokens, especially when Blink with Roon. Seems like a good way to not only make sure our opponents can't attack us, but they can't attack us well. Fling Spider gets rid of more creatures. Riftwing Cloudscape only bounces a card to its owner's hand, so that's not going to really work. Mnemonic Wall is cute, but we don't really have enough ways to interact with this. Same with Vinia. Night Captain also doesn't give us enough cards. This lets us draw cards. This puts 4 tokens into play, 3 tokens into play. A card we mentioned was amazing. Void Maze Husher is a card I really want to experiment with, but that being said, since I haven't experimented with it yet, it can actually leave this game. Same with Tristani. Stonehorn Dignitary will stand right on top of Prime Speaker while we decide whether or not it's good enough. Venser again has that same problem with Riftwing Cloudscape that just doesn't do enough. I like Resto Angel. I think this is a very good combat trick, as well as a good way to make sure our opponents can't get us. Mystic Snake is a cheaper version of an earlier card, so it may just make it through this. Master Biomancer, the idea was strong. We don't have ways to increase his power on its own, and we don't have ways to really make it that great, so we're going to let it leave. Luxon Hierarch, I like the life gain on it. I think the life gain's important, but it's very close to getting out. Killing Point stack lets us bounce some more permanents. Is a good way to keep the deck a little bit more inbred and synergistic. Archaeomancer finding the same problem as an earlier spell. We don't really have that many things to get back. I love Angel of Finality. Marshal's Anthem, a good way to pump up those tokens as well as get back key cards. I love the idea of Face Reward and Rider Replication. Soul Foundry might leave. I don't know if there's a card that we really want to just keep making the same copy of every single turn, besides, like, yeah, no, there really isn't. Birthing Pod, again, staying in because we can chain up very easily. Flicker Wisp, Fiend Hunter, Ewit, Second Sunrise, Ghostway, Ghostly Flicker. Curio actually just seems like more trouble than it's worth. White Mane Lion is fine, so is Rift Sweeper, Miss Meadow Witch. Augury Owl doesn't do enough, now that it is Otherworldly Journey, Momentary Blink, and Cyclonic Rift. So we have 76 cards on our first pass through. And you know what that means. If your answer was we got to go again, your answer is correct. We are actually going to put back in all of the cards we said were safe, and we're going to take another look. What does our curve look like? We have an average CMC of 4, which is actually a lot better than most decks. Most decks have an average CMC of about 5. I wouldn't mind making it a little bit lower, so we're going to reevaluate a lot of the cards that we place into this deck to make sure that they deserve the inclusion. We have 8 ways to draw cards, 8 ways to get extra lands, 8 ways to destroy artifacts or enchantments. That's a really safe way to build a deck at the beginning, and the rest is just basically to salt. I don't like our 7-drop slot. I think we're just playing way too many of them. So we're going to take out at least one of these cards. I think the weakest of all of these is actually Luminant Primordial, so we're going to let this guy go, and I think our 7 drops are safe. I see just Green Sun Zenith being possibly one of the best cards in the entire deck, so I can't really see taking it out here. Sunblast Angel may just be too cute. And what I mean by that is that although the effect is strong, I don't know if it's strong enough to really see play. Day Navigator is amazing. The reason why I keep looking at Bane of Progress is because of how strong it is with Revelark, but with the amount of artifacts and enchantments we're playing on our own deck, we can't really play this spell. Duplicant stays in. Thragtusk stays in. Stingerfling Spider can go out because we have a lot more removal that isn't limited that stays in this deck. Prophet of Krufix, Revelark, Moldrifter, Karmic Guide would never leave this deck. Enduring Stomp Power is a maybe. Griff Vanguard only lets us draw 1 card, so he's actually going to leave. I don't like the idea of paying 2 mana to draw a single card. That's just not worth an EDH. Cloudgoat Ranger, actually maybe not Cloudgoat. Cloudgoat might not make it through this. Hibernation's End Fine, Urban Evolution, Mind's Eye. Is Mind's Eye what we're looking to? If we take out Mind's Eye, we only really have 6 ways to draw extra cards. In a deck that is just based off of infinite value, do we really need Mind's Eye? Are we going to have mana open during our opponent's turn all the time? If we're playing a card like Prophet of Krufix, probably not. Especially if we're playing Roon, I don't know if we really have the ability to just play out Mind's Eye and sit behind it. So we are going to lose the Mind's Eye. We're down to 70 cards. That's 29 lands. We need to take out 10 more cards here. I still love Conjurer's Closet. There's no way we're taking it out. Same with Tower Guy. Stonehorn Dignitary, just a little bit too cute. Resto Angel going to stay in. Same with Andu Giant. Mystic Snake might come out just because of Luxon Hierarch comes out. Stag can stay in one more time. I don't like Fathom Mage. Also, that art was really bad. Archaeomancer. Let's see what our instant and sorcery spells are for Archaeomancer. We have Urban Evolution, Tooth and Nail. GSD will never hit our graveyard unless it's milled. Explosive Veg, Harmonize, Rider Replication, Face Reward, Return to Dust, Cultivate, K-Reach, Bant Charm, Ghostly Flicker, Ghostway, Second Sunrise, Blink, Cyclonic Rift, Ponder. So these are the cards that our Archaeomancer can get back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I like these cards. Yeah, we're not losing our Chaomancer. I like how that's why we're not losing it. I like the card, so we're not going to lose our Chaomancer. I think we lose Second Sunrise and just keep Face Reward. Face Reward is just so good off of our Wrath effect, but Second Sunrise lets everyone get those cards back. Since we're playing Aura Shards, I don't think we need to play a Harmonic Sliver. Those cards are just a little bit too similar. And Aura Shards is just so repeatable and just, gosh, sometimes it feels broken when it's on your side of the battlefield. Looking at our deck, I don't see many ways to really get those activated abilities of Rings of Brighthearth. Even though the Shrinic Resonator Rings of Brighthearth ability is really cute, and the way it works with Roon is very strong, since every other card in this deck works so well with Roon, we're just gonna... Are we really getting rid of Rings? I think we are. The things that are good with it are Birthing Pod and Roon. If that's it, then it just goes. And Nephalia Smuggler and Miss Meadow Witch. This is super, super, super close, actually. Rings of Brighthearth is... we're going to see if we can not get rid of it again. Rift Sweeper we're going to take out just because in the current meta it's not the best. It will be later, but not right now. White Mane Lion is close. I just love the fact that I can flash this in and save something. I think it's an ability that doesn't happen on other cards. We have Resto Angel in, it does the same exact idea. So yeah, White Mane Lion can leave. We're getting close. We only need really 2 more cards to come out of this deck. So what are our last 2 cards? Let's once again go to the stats section and see what it looks like. Our CMC is 4.08. We're more heavy green than we are blue and white. We have a glut of 4 drops and a bunch of 3 drops and 7 drops. Is there a way to really thin out this 4 drop aisle? There's something that needs to go. I want to be able to draw cards. I don't want to get rid of Mats and Myers right now. I like Angel Finality. Maybe we just get rid of Marshall's Anthem. Yeah, Marshall's Anthem comes out. Then maybe Face Reward is just a little bit too cute. We got rid of... Yeah, this card's too cute. Alright. So this is our 61. We're going to be able to put in 38 lands on top of this with all the green cards. That should be just fine. And I like this 31 a lot, actually. This is a very, very, very strong deck as built. Again, we went down to 7 ways to deal with artifacts or enchantments. We have multiple ways to get rid of actual specific creatures. This deck should do a lot of work. There's still some flavor in this deck. Not everything is stock, which is really nice. Being able to play Hornet Queen and Cloudguard Ranger in a deck like this is really fun. Angel Finality is a card that I'm sure is going to be an all-star. And let's go to lands. We have 38 lands available. In this deck, we're going to go a little bit more pricey on our lands. We're just going to go for our cards, though. We're not going to be playing any lands. We will be playing Shocks in this build, just because Shock lands are just so fantastic. We're also playing Alchemist Refuge. The ability to give cards out in the battlefield flash is super strong and something that opponents don't really expect, even if it's staring them in the face. They're like, oh, wait, you activated Alchemist Refuge? How dead am I? And you let them know they're very dead. We're playing a lot of tokens in this deck where we're going to be able to make a lot of tokens, so Gavany Township will shine in this type of build. I don't really want to play Evolving Wilds, or I want to play one of Evolving Wilds of Terramorphic Expanse in this deck. We have so many other ways to get basic lands out of our deck that Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic might be a little bit of an overkill. Also, we don't want to make all of our cards in the battlefield tapped. That's never a good idea. It's actually one of the best ways to make your deck worse. Hinterland Harbor, Homeward Path. Homeward Path is actually, no, we are not the deck for Homeward Path. We can blink our own creatures to get it back, so we do not need to play Homeward Path. That will probably only give our opponents a benefit over ourselves. So, not always the best idea to give your opponents a benefit. It is a symmetrical ability, and something that we don't really need to have happen for our deck to function at a high level. Opal Palace is a very interesting card. I actually don't mind talking about it as I just keep putting in more lands. So we'll bring up the card window so you can actually see what it says. That's a good idea. Opal Palace is a common from Commander 2013. Ooh, just realized that that's not going to work, is it? Yeah, no, it's not. Maybe? Nope. Opal Palace, basically a okay Shimmering Grotto. You can tap to add 1, or you can pay 1 to get a mana of any color into your mana pool. And then if you use your use it to cast your commander comes down with a +1/+1 counter on it. It's a very cute idea, but it's literally Shimmering Grotto that has a small benefit when you want to pay more mana for your commander. It's good in specific decks, like it's good in a Prime Speaker's Agana deck where getting that extra counter makes him bigger. It's good in a Marith deck where that extra counter, again, makes him bigger and you get more benefit out of it. But after those decks, its ability to really be useful in a game severely decreases, and isn't something I'd really look to actively have in a EDH deck unless I have ways to use that +1/+1 counter that it comes down with. And most of the time, it's just not worth paying that extra mana to make. It's not worth waiting an extra turn to get your creature on the battlefield just so it gets a little bit bigger. In fact, that's rarely worth it. We're almost done with our lands. Now, I do want to play one of each Vivid. I really love the Vivids. I just think what they bring to a deck is really great. You know what Vivid I don't want to play? Vivid Crag, because we're not playing red, but we do want to play Vivid Meadow. So looking at our deck, I do want to play a nice amount of basics. We're playing Cave Reach, we're playing Wood Elves. We need bases in this deck so we can actually fetch them. We have 75 lands left. Let's quickly look at stats. So you'll see we'll have 23, 26, 37. We have 24 slots for our deck. This is a... I mean, you can actually just bring up a calculator, which is what I'm doing. So out of 86 mana symbols, we need about 40% of our lands to be green. So then all you do, 24 times... So we need about 10 lands to be green. Seems easy enough. So we'll make 10 lands green, and then we'll do a 7/7 split on white and blue. We'll make sure we show all versions so we can get every single one of our beautiful Zendikar lands in here. Add 10 forests, 7 islands, and 7 plains. Ooh, I missed one? Oh. Let's add in an extra plains for value. Of course, for value. That's how that works. And we're good. And so this was building from the commander down. The main difference between building from the commander down and from building it from the strategy up is that you really want to get cards that work with your commander. That's Rings of Brighthearth, that's Thousand Year Elixir, that's Tyrannic Resonator, and then you get the strategy from your commander down. Now the cool part about the Commander 2013 Generals, and the reason why I used Roon, is because you can really build a deck that has a very cohesive strategy that also goes along with your commander. That's incredibly easy to do, and something that's actually built into the commanders that come with that product. For us, Roon already lends itself to a Bant Blink deck that already existed in the format, so it was a bit easier to build, but at the same time may have muddled the distinction between commander down and building it from the strategy up. That being said, I do think this is a very good representation of it. We'll just name this Roon and save it to the desktop. I think this deck could actually perform very well. It gets all your bases covered. There's multiple ways to win the game. There's multiple ways to make sure that you keep your opponents in check. And it is something I would easily play in, whether it be real life online or at your local F&M, and they do EDH for some reason. Now, there will be 2 more videos. One will be the last way you can really build an EDH deck. A lot of people call it just good stuff. I like to call it Power Punch. Basically, you just play the most powerful cards, even if they don't have any real interactions with each other, and you build a deck based around that idea. It's really one that my best friend Kevin does a lot, and it's still just really strong. When you're playing the best cards in a format that play cards like Demonic Tutor, it's really hard not to build a good deck. It's different from the strategy build. It's different from Commander Down. It is a legitimate way to build the deck. It is the hardest way to build the deck, though. It requires a lot, and I mean a lot, of knowledge on the format. If you don't know what cards are good in Commander, you won't do well with it. This format, I think, is probably the second, is the easiest after strategy up. Building a deck from the commander down does require a slight knowledge of the other cards that are available for Magic for your commander. Once again, Roon, I wouldn't say is the easiest deck to build, isn't really the easiest deck to build, but a deck that I had fun building. I do like the abilities that come with it, and it does lend itself to a very simplistic deck and one that you can really win quickly with. If there's one thing I would have wanted to add more to this deck. I wouldn't have minded. I guess this deck could really use Creator of Behemoth. I think Creator of Behemoth gives you a really easy win condition. I just don't like playing it accompanied with Tooth and Nail. It just really feels kind of cheap to me, so we didn't put it into this deck. But yeah, Creator of Behemoth belongs. And yeah, this is definitely building from the commander up. from the commander down. We took Roon, we built the deck around him, and we built a build where he shines. And that's really where commander down is made for, as opposed to our strategy up deck, where we literally picked our commander at the last second just because he was an elf and he did stuff with the elf deck. So I really hope you enjoyed this deck building video. I hope this really showcased one of the ways you can really build decks in EDH, which again is from the commander or the legendary creature down. Now our next part 3 is going to be all about the Power Punch deck building style, which is where you just literally build a deck based off of the strongest cards in EDH, whether it be Sylvan Primordial Creator, Hope Behemoth, or Avenger Zendikar, and you just go from that area down. Even if they don't interact with each other, you build it in that direction. And I'll put up a video showing that deck style as well. Again, it requires a deeper knowledge of the format. It's a deck where you would never play a card like Glimmerpoint Stag, because this is obviously not good enough, but in a deck down, you would. And then the last video is going to be pretty much the last video in the series, and it's going to be, I don't know what I'm going to be naming it yet, but it's going to have a lot of really cool things. It's going to show you a general where I built it in 3 different ways, one from commander down, one from strategy up, and one with a Power Punch deck building style. And then it's also going to give you a little bit of seedlings. I know a lot of people kind of have trouble figuring out where to go next when it comes to commander. Like, what can I do next? I've done so much. What do I need to do next? And it's going to talk a lot about deck building commander that way, as well as the amazing options you have in it. That being said, thank you so much for tuning in. These are actually kind of cool to do. I like doing these little videos that talk a lot about deck building and go a little bit more in depth into why certain cards get into a deck and don't get into a deck. I really hope you had fun with it. If you have any comments, concerns, or if you like it, let me know. If you'd rather I just keep losing with that shadow deck, please let me know as well. I'm pretty sure I'd rather just win with it. Have a great day, guys, and thank you for tuning in.